So we have an official debate happening. We have Ishka here. We have Arco. For this debate, Ishka is defending the proposition that we should define veganism as an animal products boycott, which is primarily against animal agriculture, and not the definition veganism is an ethical way of living that excludes using animals as merely instruments to our ends. Arco is taking the opposition. As always, when we base upon who concedes, if we don't get a vocal concession from either participant, we'll put it to a voting poll in which you, the audience, can vote. And be sure to base your vote off who you think performed better overall in the debate. Thank you both for debating. There'll be light moderation, no time limit. You can get started.
Cool. I'll give an introduction speech. So I define veganism as simply an animal products boycott. I make the point of saying it's one campaign tactic among many, aimed primarily at achieving the end of animal agriculture, and that personally, I see the principle behind the action as being grounded in the animal rights movement, seeking collective legal rights for animals to have a refuge in dense wildlife habitat where they aren't subject to human cruelty. In a similar way to how the act of boycotting South African products or the act of boycotting the Montgomery Bus Company was grounded in a larger civil rights movement. Other boycotts didn't have a specific name for the identity one took on when boycotting. The principle for why they boycotted was contained in what it meant to be part of a larger movement, e.g., being a civil rights advocate. So I would just encourage people to think of themselves as animal rights advocates first, fighting for the legal protection of animals. So you could also call yourself an animal liberation advocate, fighting to free non-human animals to be able to express their capabilities in managed wildlife habitat or a sanctuary. As for why someone would arrive at the ethical conclusion to boycott, it could be a million ways. You just need to tailor your argument to the person you're standing in front of, as we'll go into. I can give some examples of the principle that got you into veganism and what branch of philosophy it may be related to. Two examples are preference consequentialism, the principle of not breeding sentient life into the world to kill when you know they will have interest to go on living longer than would be profitable, or nihilist metaethics, the principle that you should be wary of inauthentically acting in a way you don't believe due to outside social pressures, like acting uncaringly is necessary to what it means to be a man. And yeah, that we'll go into more in the debate. That'll be my introduction.
Cool. Thanks for debating. I'd like to start by saying a bit about the use of words. So when we make an utterance, it's referring to some type of content. And so when we say we should use a word in a specific way, what we're saying is we should be referring to this content, and that's the important fact of the matter. So in the proposition, veganism should be stated as an animal products boycott. The claim there is to say the important part of veganism is boycotting animal products. And I would say the important part of veganism is referring to the grounding principles. So rather than making the actions entailed by the grounding principles explicit, we should make the grounding principles explicit, which is why I think a definition as an ethical way of living that excludes using animals as merely instruments to our ends is a better definition, and we ought to adopt that definition instead. And I have a few things to say about boycotting in addition to this. One of the reasons why boycotting is being used is because it illustrates that there's an activism present in veganism. And I grant that that activism is important, and I think that there is utility there for the activism. And as a vegan myself, I do boycott these products, and I encourage people to boycott these products. But going back to the civil rights advocates, we wouldn't define civil rights as boycotting businesses that segregate. We would define it in a different way. We would appeal to the grounding of the civil rights movement and why we ought to do that, why we should grant the civil rights there. And that's the meaningful content behind the word civil rights movement or behind the word veganism, what we're pointing out, rather than the political action. So I think the reason why we should not adopt the definition presented here is because of what the words are referring to, what they're making explicit. And I think we should make the ethical way of living the explicit content rather than the political action that would be entailed by an ethical way of living. And we can go into some examples in the debate.
Cool. Yeah, so obviously we're both vegans, so we might not disagree on some good principles that could lead you to veganism. It's going to be a very semantic discussion, because I basically think veganism came, the vegan society came from the vegetarian society, and I just I think it's best as like a minimal behavioral commitment, because that's the history of the term, but that in terms of like selling it, we should think of ourselves as animal rights advocates first, because vegetable, vegan, vegetable, it's just, it doesn't the etymology of it isn't that inspiring, but animal rights is clear in the name, where the principle comes from. So yeah,
Sorry,
I
I
don't know.
didn't quite understand that last point, if you don't mind repeating it.
Yeah, but like the etymology of the word vegan is just cutting out the middle part of vegetarian to make vegan, right? And
yeah,
it's
it's the end and the beginning of vegetarian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the history of vegetarian societies is all sorts of people just is like it's like a lifestyle society. It has some political edge to it, like people creating settlements in the wild west of like utilitarian efficiency movements and stuff. But it encompassed everyone. Like it encompassed people who just like spiritually like wanting to like refine their diet down to some bare minimum or something. So I think that's something like in the word, it's like connected to that history and to that popular usage of just like avoiding use of the use or consumption of animal bodies. But that we need to create a distance between the word vegan and animal rights, so that people understand that actually what we're really working towards is political. It's a movement that encompasses lots of strategies, like lobbying and boycotting isn't necessarily need to be the sole focus. Like we need activists, we need people getting out there and doing this stuff. Yeah, I don't know.
So you're saying that, let me just make sure the claim is clear. You're saying that we should be focusing on the political strategy, and that's where part of the utility of this definition. But why should we be focusing on the political strategy rather than the ethics and changing hearts and minds about the ethics?
Well, a boycott is infers an ethical judgment on how the action is derived. So it must contain ethics. Like it can't just be plant based. It can't just be deciding to eat only vegan for your health, because there's
Sure,
like
yeah.
plant leathers.
I agree
So,
with you that boycott has baked into it this idea of morality. One synonym that I like about boycotting is moral purchasing, but I have a question about that. So, for example, let's say that there's a person who is a vegan in action. They're boycotting all animal products, but they are doing so because of the reasons being they're anti-capitalist, and then think that there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. And so they're a vegan by accident, by outcome, but they don't give a shit about the animal rights at all. They are boycotting all animal products. Would you call this person who has no care about animal rights at all, but in practice boycotts animal products because they're boycotting capitalism, a vegan? And would you say they are following veganism?
they're definitely not following animal rights, but I don't think we have a choice to say that they're not following the behaviors of boycotting veganism, because
well, that's a different statement. To say that they're not following the ground of veganism is not to answer the question.
No,
Would you
except
call them vegan, or say they're following veganism?
I would say they're following veganism, as well as like people who are ex-vegan. Like if I think who were as well as like, I think we need to accept the fact that like someone can like believe in the boycott for a time, and then like after a time just like slowly lose their passion for it and just become ex-vegan. I think that's like we just need to accept these realities, and because of the etymology of the word, and like people believing it's just not using animal products, that we just do have to deal with these realities. Like even eco-fascists wanting to boycott animal products and just denounce them separately.
Well, I think the ex-vegan question is really interesting, but I don't think it's quite related to the capitalist boycotter. So like I'm happy to grant that we can call an ex-vegan actually being vegan in that time period. That's fine. But that's not related to the idea of boycotting here, because you said you would call this person a vegan just because they practiced all of the actions. But on my view, the reasons why they were boycotting animal products had nothing to do with animal rights at all. So in that case, I wouldn't call them a vegan.
You can say they were desiring to be a vegan, so you wouldn't like introduce them in a room as like, here's my vegan friend. But in terms of like them doing the action, I think they're eating vegan food. You could say they're buying vegan products, I think.
Sure. Okay. So we wouldn't introduce them as my vegan friend, but consequentially, they would be a vegan. Now, when someone asks you, are you vegan? Do you think that the question is referring to, is this person someone you would introduce at a party as a vegan, or is this person who consequentially acts like a vegan? Because in my view, they're asking the first question, is this a person who identifies as this, who practices animal rights, et cetera, rather than like they fit a description of someone else's actions that have different groundings.
I'm not sure I see the contrast. Yeah, I don't know. Could you explain more?
Yeah, sure. So you were saying, if this person who is boycotting animal products, maybe we should come up with a name for them. I don't know.
Well, I think they're vegans, but you want to
right, yeah. So they're an anti-capitalist, so they're boycotting capitalism. They don't care about animal rights at all. There's zero care there. They're really just there to like give a middle finger to capitalism. And in that case, when you go to a party, you said, I would not introduce them as a vegan. My question that follows from that is, when someone asks, are you vegan? What that is referring to is the person who you would introduce as a vegan or not. On my view, it is referring to a person you would introduce as a vegan. But in your view, you're saying this person would be a vegan, but I wouldn't introduce them as a vegan.
I reject that they desire that they have that they fit in the adjective. I'm rubbish English, but is it like adjectives and nouns? I reject that they fit in as an adjective, but like but by me defining veganism as behavior, like they just do happen to act vegan.
Well, you're not just defining it based on behavior. It's a specific type of behavior. It's a political behavior. It's a behavior where you're boycotting products.
Right.
But
if
so
they are doing it for sincere...
boycotting is about purchasing. It's moral purchasing. But that doesn't encounter, for example, who goes into the woods and kills a deer. There's no purchase there that takes place. But I wouldn't call a deer hunter a vegan, because they're using the animal's body as a means to their ends. There's no animal rights there. There's no consideration for the animal.
Well, no, I would say anything that can be turned into a product, you're by your desire to boycott it, decide to prevent the incentive for it ever happening, means that you wouldn't want to do it yourself.
Well, that wouldn't be a case of boycotting, though, because that's not moral purchasing.
No, I know, but if you to be someone who wants to act vegan, you have to have the ethics of someone who wouldn't do it themselves. It's like antithetical. Like, you can't desire. It's like
okay, so you have to have the ethics to be a vegan. Yet this person who doesn't have the ethics, you would call a vegan.
If they wouldn't do it themselves, like, because they have to be. I mean, yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, I wouldn't. Like, so let's see. Hang on. Let me see my notes. Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. I mean, if we have, what is the problem with calling anti-capitalists a vegan if they have to be part of this like bigger tent movement which includes veganism. Like I can be repulsed by the eco-fascist who wants to boycott animal products, but I still like they still happen to be doing one part of their life which advances the same goals as me. What would be the problem with calling them vegan?
I mean, if I would call an eco-fascist who has, as part of their beliefs, this ethical grounding, I would call them a vegan, and I would
Mhm.
just condemn the things I find morally
Yeah.
repugnant about what they do.
Yeah,
Like,
same.
if they bomb a building and kill innocent people, I can condemn that, but still call them a vegan.
Mm-hmm. So what's wrong with calling the anti-capitalist person who happens to
Because I think what vegan is referring to, like when we make an utterance, there's a meaning, there's something referred to, there's a content behind that word. And the content of the word vegan is someone who is boycotting animal products for the sake
Right.
of the animals in one sense or another.
Right. So, but if you call veganism the behavior and animal products boycott, and you define a vegan as someone who desires to boycott animal products, then they don't fit into being able to identify as a vegan, but they fit into behaving as a vegan.
Yeah, their behavior would be identical to a vegan's, but I would not call them a vegan because I think what makes someone a
neither would I.
vegan is the ethical ground. Okay, right. So you wouldn't call this anti-capitalist a vegan, but you would
No, they
call
wouldn't be
the
able to.
eco-fascist a vegan.
If they identified as someone who like purposefully decided to boycott animal products, yeah.
Okay, so all right, so here's an interesting question then. So you
Mhm.
would call the anti-capitalist who has no ethical grounding, who is consequentially a vegan, you would not call them a vegan, but your definition of veganism would be someone who boycotts animal products. So
Well,
there's a
no,
little bit of an inconsistency there.
my definition is my definition of veganism, and I think veganism is a behavior like heroism, acting bravely. I think it's so. But there's another like a separate definition, like when you turn the word from veganism to vegan, it's like something you and I like. It's a person who desires to boycott animal products. So there's two different words.
Okay, I see the confusion here. What I take a vegan to be is someone who follows veganism. It's just an individual who has an ethical way of living.
Right, but I would have two different definitions: an animal products boycott for veganism, and then a person who desires to boycott animal products. The person who desires to do an animal products boycott or to boycott primarily the animal agriculture industry as a vegan.
Well, but
That's
then
veganism.
I think this is sort of in opposition to what you said earlier, which is the anti-capitalist who's boycotting animal products because of boycotting capitalism. You said you would not call them a vegan, but when
Because
you
they
tell
don't
me the
desire it.
definition of a vegan, it would still fit that person.
No, I just said what is veganism? An animal products boycott, the behavior, veganism, an animal products boycott. What is a vegan? A person who desires to boycott to do an animal products boycott. The anti-capitalist isn't a vegan, but they do a veganism when they act.
Well,
They
okay, so
don't consume animal.
let me just see if I am understanding properly because I'm a little confused. I think there might be I'm not seeing a reason why he is not a vegan just based on the definition. So first, your definition of veganism is an animal products boycott. Your definition of a vegan is someone who wants to do an animal products boycott or someone who does an animal products boycott. Okay. Now,
They desire
am I correct on those
they
things,
desire
first
to
of all?
do an animal boycott.
Yeah, they desire to do it, right? So there's an intention behind it. They intentionally boycott animal products. Now, that intention, I've said, for the anti-capitalist is because they want to give a big middle finger to capitalism. Now,
But
that intention would still fit inside the definition you provided, but you said that that person is not a vegan.
no, it's not. It's not. Yeah, they desire to do. They do desire to meet a different end than vegans do. Like it's part of something else. Like they
Okay,
can't be said to be specifically. Yeah.
cool. So what makes the intention vegan or not is the intention for the animal's sake, correct?
No, not necessarily. They desire. Yeah, they
Can you
desire.
provide an example when it's not for the animal's sake that would make it vegan?
Well, they just enjoy the aesthetic of seeing animals out in the wild. They want a space for humans and they want a space for animals, and it might not necessarily be for the animals, but it can be for them.
I'd like you to walk me through that a little bit,
Yeah.
because how is that? So you're saying that there's a vegan out there who abstains from animal products because they like the way animals look in nature.
Yeah, like annihilus, yeah. So thermodynamics, you free up more land by just eating the plants yourself rather than feeding the plants through an animal to yourself. Sorry, there's a plane going overhead. So yeah, there's ways of living on a plant-based diet that definitely free up more land than farming animals. So you can
But you switched it to plant-based diet there. Now, do you take a plant-based diet to be identical?
No, it's the same part. That's part of it. Like, yeah. So even like farming animals for leather, like.
Right. So you do grant there's a distinction between plant-based and vegan.
Yeah.
Correct.
For sure. Okay. Yeah. No, I was just giving that example.
Okay. So this person being plant-based is
no,
not
but like
telling
farming.
Vegan.
Yeah. No. No. Sorry. I misspoke. I just mean like, farming animals for leather or food, like any products that derive from an animal, like the body of an animal. So someone could want to do no animal farming, no, and just like happen to like aesthetically not enjoy hunting. Like they could design, and so they could be acting through doing an animal products boycott, and they would be bringing about like a world very close to what vegans want, which is just animals being left alone.
Okay, so let me give you a hypothetical then.
Mm-hmm.
Let's imagine a future where the entire world is vegan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a little child grows up in this world. They know about animals, but they're never taught any ethics about animals. They're never taught anything about how the animals have a right to live, that we shouldn't use them or anything like that. They're just raised in a society where everything is vegan. All the products are vegan. So they never learn that the animals are something that can be used. They have no ethics about it, but in practice, they follow this plant-based diet, and they use all synthetic materials made by industrial advanced societies. That child who grows up to be an adult, who has no ethical grounding for animal rights or animal consideration, on your view, would that person be a vegan? They never thought about animal rights at all. They never thought about anything like that. Is that a vegan?
The whole world would be doing a veganism. They'd be doing vegan acts.
No. The world has no ethics for the animals at all. It just happens to be the case that they're vegan by accident. So would they be vegans? They would have no desire, no intention, or anything like that.
They wouldn't be animal rights advocates, but I agree. Like, I accept bite the bullet. They would be doing a veganism, but because they'd have achieved a vegan world. But
right. But I just think that what I think's happened here is you've taken veganism and pushed it into the camp of plant-based.
No, leather as well.
Right. Leather would be like we can just start including leather into plant-based leather. They call it that when you buy vegan shoes now, plant-based leather.
Okay, well, but in terms of street advocacy and winning people over to, I think that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I've already granted that there's an activist utility in telling people that, just simply like, hey, we should boycott animal products. But we're talking about like what it means to be a vegan, what this word is referring to, and why we should use that reference over another. And in the hypothetical of a future state, what would we be referring to in that case? Because they would have no grounding of animal rights ethics or anything like that. It wouldn't even be part of their consciousness.
Okay, so right, so I think of it as like twofold. Like you can define yourself. We should accept people as vegan who like plant-based leather and plant-based vegan for the ethics, not just for the health. And so the minimal behavioral commitments of an animal products boycott, but also people can still think of themselves as vegan for a way of living which seeks to exclude all use of animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. And the reason why we like harp on the animal products boycott and street advocacy is because like it's that simple, got cast iron meaning anything that derived it's any product that derived from a body of an animal. But maybe late, like in terms of like words just have like, it's just we just use whatever words have the most utility. And so like when we've got like a 15% vegan world and like everyone knows that like the animal agriculture industry is faltering and all these other big industries are propping up, like being propped up, like hunting lodges, eco tourism, hunting entertainment, we can start to shift our focus onto those things. When we see more utility in fighting other campaigns, we can just say, right, now everyone knows that everyone knows what veganism is animal products. We're like veganism 2.0. We want people now to think of veganism as solely a way of living which seeks to exclude all use of animals for food. There can be like a big like press announcement, vegan society, here we are, like, okay, now we're no longer going to accept vegan as an animal products boycott. I think we can do that and just like shift by popular usage.
Well, the popular usage of the term currently is based on the ethics. So what you're advocating for right now is changing the definition to be about this political strategy.
I don't know.
But it seems to me like we could just keep using this ethical based usage of the word.
You think most people know about the vegan society definition? I think people know that vegan is like a more, like most people think of veganism as like a more extreme thing of vegetarianism, and they just think about like you cutting out animal products from your life, like making the commitment in your lifestyle. Like I think.
Yeah, but what is that commitment? What is that commitment grounded in? I think when people imagine a vegan, they're imagining an ethical reason for it. And I think the whole reason why
even vegetarianism a little bit.
Yeah, I think the whole reason why plant-based has become a marketing strategy is to try and market vegan foods without the moral baggage. So they're trying to divorce the morality from it by introducing this marketing term, which is plant-based. So
yeah, but I don't think we. But yeah,
but this is just to illustrate the point. This is just to illustrate the point that I think our common sense notion of a vegan is there's some ethical reason why we're not consuming animal products.
Yeah, and I'm happy for that to be there. But
sure.
Yeah.
But so my point is, you're trying to say that we should adopt this other usage of vegan, which is animal products boycott. But if we're going to talk about like the street advocacy, right? Most people who are going to be in like a major metropolitan area are familiar with vegans. They know what they are. They know what they do. They know that vegans are abstaining from animal products. Now, when we're advocating to them, we're telling them why they should abstain from animal products, because it's for the sake of the animals. So I think we should keep the definition in that realm. That way, we're giving them reasons to do an animal products boycott. The important feature here is the reason.
But I think we should advocate to them to think of themselves as animal rights advocates. And
totally. And let's make the definition about animal rights advocacy.
Yeah, but it's more important that people think of, like, rather than going around identifying as a vegan, like to have in their minds that veganism is just one part of what they do that is included in a tent of animal rights.
Right, but an animal products boycott the definition being an animal rights boycott isn't informing us of that. It's just telling us the actions. Like a computer can do an animal rights boycott.
Yeah, we don't sell them on become a vegan because you be boycotting animal products. We say think of yourself as please think of yourself as an animal rights advocate, and then join this big community which is doing loads of different strategies like creating vegan cafes, creating food not bomb stalls, foraging groups, all these things that hope to create a breathing room for legislation. And you can think of veganism as one part of that boycotting.
Yeah, but so if it's one part of it, then why should the definition be this one part of it when it's much grander? There's
Because
political
veganism as a
action,
word
there's
is
legislation, there's telling people, there's encouraging people to change their minds, there's the argument about the ethics, all of these things. But an animal products boycott doesn't get at that. It doesn't communicate that to people. And it's also something that people already know
but yeah,
about veganism. They already know it's an animal products boycott, so it's not providing meaningful information.
right. Because I think all the things you just said should be included in what it means to be an animal rights advocate, and like it just has more currency. Animal rights, like you get less converts just coming on for like beauty and subculture and wanting to have this identity, and you get more people thinking, okay, cool, I'm doing politics, I'm doing animal rights, like and like I need to also do all these other strategies.
Right, but I guess I'm confused now because you're saying it seems to me like your claim is veganism as a definition is an animal products boycott, full stop. A vegan is an animal rights advocate who boycotts animal products.
No, a vegan is a person who desires to do an animal products boycott.
Okay, so
animal rights
in those definitions, there's nothing about ethics there.
No, it's just behavior. I mean, it infers an
Right.
ethical sense, judgment.
Right. Well, boycott has an implication of moral purchasing, but the morality is only indexed
it comes from the animal
in
rights.
purchasing.
Yeah, the principle comes from you wanting to be an animal rights advocate and wanting to do veganism as a strategy. Like veganism only makes sense as part of a lot larger movement where you're doing all these we help veganism grow faster by also doing all these other things like lobbying and stuff. So veganism has the most currency when you think of it as part of a larger animal rights movement. So people need to think of themselves.
I think the definition should be this larger animal rights movement definition rather than this
why would you want to
narrow
include
behavior.
But why would you want to try and shovel that into veganism, which just like is this weird word like vegetabilism, rather than animal rights, which right there in the word is like what you're seeking, like legal animal rights.
Because not every vegan is an animal rights person.
I agree, but like so
some of
those
them are
people
utilitarians who think who are trying to optimize the well-being. Some of them are virtue ethicists who find it cruel to treat animals.
Well, no, because that's a mistake. Because I'm saying legal animal rights, like like trying to improve the welfare of animals is still the animals' legal rights. Like the laws work based on rules. Like
so by right you mean more just a legal rule.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the whole point, like we can include that with an ethical way of living, because an ethical way of living would entail advocacy for things you find as unjust.
Yeah. This goes back to the first one. I kept saying you can do this, but like if you try to include only like a strict definition of what of like wording into veganism, then you get people who are put off by some words. So like treat. So your definition is you want to not treat animals as ends, and then that's like
merely instruments to our ends. Yeah, merely
right, right, and that's the counter opposite to consequentialness. So if you try to tell
that you could, because you can hold the view that we should not use animals as instruments to our ends, our goals, And the reason why we shouldn't do that can be utilitarian, which is
Yeah, you can
optimizing
cash it out
well-being.
to utilitarian.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you
So like,
you can cash it out to utilitarian, but if people hear that the definition of veganism is this thing about not treating things as ends, like someone's whole Consequential's whole philosophy is being outcome orientated, looking for the best ends. So it's like it's trying to use when I was debating this, it was like it's trying to use exploitation as this blank magic word where where anything goes. And so like, hang on, I'll read this. Hang on. Oh shit, I've lost it.
well, so ends here, instruments to our ends, merely instruments to our ends. Like that phrase, I mean, ends is a synonym for goals or something like that, or our purposes. And there's no reason for that to then be shoehorned into like deontology, or sorry, deontology, even though I'm a deontologist.
Okay, so let's say someone wanted to define veganism as the doctrine that man should not harm animals, and then if you're a consequentialist, you have to cash that out to. Sorry, someone could say doctrine that man should not exploit animals, and then if you're a consequentialist, you have to cash that out to exploitation is reducing harm. But then equally, deontologists wouldn't like that if you changed it to the doctrine that man should not harm animals, and then have to cash that out to I'm vegan. I believe that man should not harm animals because harming animals is exploitation, and exploitation is unjustified. Like people just aren't going to like the definition is like focused on that starts out with deontology, and then you have to work backwards to find the
well, it's not
consequentialist reason.
It's not starting out as deontology. It's just using a
I think,
phrase, like the phrase. It's using a phrase to convey an idea, but it's not not the philosophical grounding is not baked into that idea or that
the
phrase.
idea is so strongly colloquially tied to deontology that like as an advocacy tool, it's just worthless to consequentialists.
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Like, so just because like the word, but instrumental things, that's not just tied to deontology, that's also tied to Aristotelian ethics, which is virtue ethics. This idea of something being our end just means goal. It's like saying spill the beans or spill the tea. There's a lexicon there that just means like using them only for our goals, whatever that means. Like that can be so many different things. Our goals can be utilitarian goals. Our goals can be deontological goals. They can be virtue ethicist goals.
Right. So what about people rescuing people thinking like if you're rescuing dogs and treating them as like you're getting comfort from them, but you know that they like you could be taking them out on more walks, and you could feel badly about that, and you're worried that you're not vegan if you're not taking them out on enough walks. What about people worrying about that in your definition?
What do you mean?
Well,
I don't see how that's incompatible.
You're trying not to treat animals as merely instruments to our own ends, but by adopting a dog, you're more fulfilling your needs than the dogs need, because the dog is like signaling to you that every day it's wanting to go out on more walks, and you're not giving it that.
That's not what merely instrumental means here.
Okay.
So when we say like merely an instrument, it means for our sake. But if you're doing something for the sake of the animal, it no longer is merely an instrument. Like, for example, I would use a person, I would exploit a person to get some kind of benefit, like a taxi driver. There's an exploitation that occurs there, but it's not an immoral exploitation because I'm not only using that person as a means to my ends. I'm still granting them moral consideration on all types of other topics. They get it inherently just by the fact that they exist. The same would be with the dog. I would be doing things for the dog's sake rather than for my sake alone. That's what it means for something to be merely instrumental.
Yeah. Okay, so what about other like things like consequences to what's the Trolley problem.
Trolley
I
problem.
don't know. Yeah, I'm just thinking like people. Yeah, I don't know. Big thing about eating two burgers to like a consequentialist might eat a burger to stop a meat eater eating two burgers, and some people would like to exclude like just can't not include that person in what it means to be a vegan. But I think if they understand that like that would never happen in our real world because of things like cultural capital. If they include cultural capital in their philosophy, then I'm fine with calling them vegan. But that would be using animals as a means to an end, instrument to an end. No, if they were willing to, if they hypothetically
Only if you take like this individualist view of animals here, but there you can look at it as like animals as a whole. So for example, you can think about the individual for the sake of one human, but we make decisions for the sake of humanity, and we can have instruments for humanity that might sacrifice an individual's good here. We would do the same thing in the case for the animals. So even though we would be using this animal as some type like there as an instrument, merely an instrument to our goal, if that goal is for the sake of animals, it's actually an instrument for the sake of animals.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So it's like kind of virtue. It's kind of virtue ethics definition that includes both consequences and deontology.
Yeah.
I would just say it takes too much explaining. like it's too vague. I mean, not you definitely you can cash out to anything, but yeah, we need to keep it more simple for advocacy.
Well, but okay, so there's different realms of what we would be doing. So in street advocacy, certain definitions might have greater utility, and that would be good reason to use that definition.
Okay, so then you
But
accept.
as a definition of veganism, I don't think that we should use just the street advocacy version as what should be the main definition. I also don't think that an animal products boycott is the most effective street activism definition.
So, well, let me just understand then. You're talking. There's a definition of vegan that you're saying you would be happy for people to walk away with on the street, but then have to work out later that actually veganism means something more. That's what I got from what you just said. Like you saying
so hold on. You already granted earlier in the conversation that when someone is coming up to you on street advocacy, they already have a notion about what a vegan is and what veganism is for.
Most people.
So we don't need to give them a definition of veganism. We need to give them reasons why they should go vegan. That should be the goal of the advocacy. And I think the definition should include the reasons.
But no, but I think also like clarifying the definition is very important because people can have all these kind of images of like of why you're doing vegan. That it necessarily means that you're caring about wild animal suffering, or you're necessarily caring about like the rights of pets or something like just like zero in on like what you're primarily against.
Right, but so if I were to do the street advocacy, the definition I provided is very simple. The only thing that might be confusing is merely instruments to our ends. But that can just be explained very quickly with like, we wouldn't do it for our sake alone, we would do it for the animal's sake. It's an ethical way of living that is doing something for the animal's sake. Just rephrasing it like that makes it clear what it's referring to. It's very simple.
Yeah, I don't know, like, 'cause it took me a while to like figure out all the weird sides of that, and I think you can just leave that up to animal rights. Like, I think we need words that have currency. Animal rights in the word, 2 words like animal rights.
Right,
like,
but I will point out, you said it took you a while to figure it out. But if you're then going to say because it took you a while to figure it out, it would then take everyone a while to figure that out. That's a fallacy of composition.
I'm not saying that I don't subscribe to this myself as part of my animal rights philosophy.
No, but I don't think you're understanding my point. If you're saying it took me, if you said it took you a while to understand.
Yeah, no, but I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that it took me a while to figure it out. I'm
It's going to
saying
take other people a while to figure it out, or no?
no. Yeah, that's. I was trying to say that I'm not saying that it took me a while to understand it. I'm saying it took me a while to work out all the ins and outs of like what it entails, and like
Well,
obviously
yeah,
like
but
I saw when I saw it, I thought, yeah, cool. I can.
all the ins and outs are also going to be a problem for your view as well. Like all the ins
No.
and outs is already baked into it, the idea that there's nuance and we have to work through the nuance, and that's going to take time no matter what definition we provide. So we have to make this calculated choice about what should be important in the definition.
No, I definitely didn't know what actions I needed to. I couldn't subscribe to with your definition. But animal products is dead simple. Like any product that derived from the body of an animal. That's like anyone can get that.
But the goal of the definition isn't to tell people what products they should consume or not, because as I said already,
I think it is.
People
it's
have
like
a
strategy,
notion.
and then
People have a notion of what a vegan is. That's not a secret to people right now. We live in a world where vegan is like what most people who have access to the internet, who you're going to meet in street advocacy, they're going to know what vegan means in terms of the actions of a vegan. So they don't need a definition in that sense. They need a definition that would contain reasons why they are vegan, what veganism is about, which is this ethical way of living. And the ethical way of living has baked into it certain types of practices for the sake of animals, which necessarily would be an animal products boycott.
But I disagree. Like I think people have bad definitions in their head. They need to know like a simple version of what veganism is, so that they can think of themselves as being able to come on board with that. And yeah, so like the principle coming from animal rights, but veganism as being one simple strategy with very clear what it entails, and yours doesn't provide that.
I don't think that it's just about the legal rights of animals. That's a goal of veganism, but that's subsumed under the ethical way of living. If we lived in a society where there were no laws and there was no state, there would still be vegans based on my definition, but on your definition, they wouldn't exist because you're using rights in the legalistic way and an animal products boycott way, which is a political action.
Well, what human wouldn't want to create a society with rules of law? Like,
well, of course they would want to, but that's not the claim I'm making. The claim I'm making is that your definition doesn't include people we would take as a vegan. For example, let's take this hypothetical of every other human on the planet is dead. Every single one is dead, except one person. This last person takes it to be unethical to use animals. They abstain from eating these animals. They abstain from using animal products. They're living in an ethical way. Just because there's no society, there's no politics, there's no purchasing that can take place, we would still call them a vegan because at the core of the idea of being a vegan is the ethical way of living. This person living by themselves is living ethically. That's that is the core meaning of being a vegan, on my view. But if you're going to say the core meaning is this like political stuff, the boycotting, all of these things in societies, if you take all of that away, the essence of it is it's gone, and all of a sudden it doesn't exist anymore.
I'm not following how that's like some gotcha, this like extremely grey area thing. Like I'm saying to protest is what it. I'm saying to have this philosophy, to have this principle is part of what it means to be an animal rights advocate, and be so like I don't know why it's such a bad thing that like if it was one person, then obviously there wouldn't be a movement. It would just be like you trying to act ethically yourself.
Well, it sounds like so earlier you said animal rights meant in the legal sense. So now you're saying no, animal rights is actually in this ethical sense.
So hang on. I'll give you like I've come up with my preferred definition of animal rights and animal movements. They're very similar. It's one thing is movement, so it's social movement, and then for animal rights, the philosophy which says what is animal rights? The philosophy which says animals should be granted collective legal rights to have a refuge in dense wildlife habitat where they aren't subject to human cruelty. So if you think of yourself as an animal rights advocate, then that's giving you the principle that you have this philosophy. And maybe you can think of yourself as an animal liberation advocate who's fighting for the to free the capability of animals. You can think of yourself as all these things, but it gives you the identity first, and then the behavior veganism as a strategy afterwards.
No, that's not your definition though. Your definition is an animal products boycott. So it gives you the action first and then the reasons for the action later.
No, but I'm saying never introduce someone to veganism as an identity, because it's not. It's a behavior. Like introduce.
Mine's
someone
not.
to
My
animal-
definition
animal-
isn't an identity.
Sorry.
My definition is not an identity.
Well, isn't it?
It's an ethical way of living. It's a way of living. You don't need an identity for that. There's no need to have the identity baked into that. It's just a way of living, which is a way of living is actions, things you do.
Mm-hmm.
The reasons why you do the actions are ethical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I accept all that. Like you can think of yourself as a way of living which seeks to exclude or use of animals, food, clothing, or any purpose. You can think of yourself as vegan that way, or you can think of yourself as a vegan just committed to the minimal behavioral commitments of boycotting. Boycotting animal products, and animal products boycotting primarily the animal agriculture industry. What's the contention? I'm lost thread.
Your definition is referring to this very narrow sector of society and very narrow sector of action. But my definition is referring to the reasons why those actions are taking place. And it is broad enough to include different reasons for someone to be vegan, different ethical reasons. We both agree that it needs to be ethical. You're making an argument that we should adopt your definition because it has greater practical benefit in street advocacy. And I've pointed out that in street advocacy, people already know vegans boycott animal products. So our goal in street advocacy should be telling them why they should boycott animal products. When we tell them the definition of veganism is something like an ethical way of living, blah, 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 we're telling them that in the definition is being ethical and actions related to ethics from the first part of the door, rather than just saying, this is the action that you should be doing.
Right, but when we explain it to them that it's a boycott like other boycotts, South African thing, it's like it's very clear conceptually that you have this very strong opposition to a thing like the animal agriculture industry.
Right, but that's a different argument than why we should adopt a definition. Like, of course, we can explain it and they can understand that it's based in the ethics and all these things, but that's not what the definition is. The definition is a semantical claim, not like how we should advocate after we tell them the definition.
Yeah, but so most people you meet in the street are going to have a definition in mind, but it's going to be a definition that includes all these things that they've come across on like Facebook about like vegans being weird and stuff. It's going to be like I think, oh, maybe if I have to become a vegan, I have to like sweep the streets and become a Jain monk. Like they might be like turned off by the idea of like what kind of identity concepts they have to take on board, like be part of this weird subculture. I'm saying that you just narrow it down to say, well, no, you've been mistaken about all those things. You can just take on this minimal behavioral commitment to be vegan, and all those like weird principles things that you've seen, like that's just like a subset of the movement, like of the animal rights movement. Like you can be an animal rights advocate for this other very clear reason. You can have your own philosophy, like your own very specific philosophy. When you hear veganism is an ethical way of living that excludes using animals as merely instruments to our ends, you think, oh, maybe I'm outcome oriented. Like, why? So I have to now think about how my interesting consequential ends filters back through actions, then to become ends again. Like it's just a like it doesn't grant like the openness that you can with giving people like arguments like marginal cases and just saying like,
well, hold
oh
on.
cool,
You're saying you're attacking the definition, and then you're saying you can give these other arguments, which is disanalogous, because to attack the definition and say there's a better one, you have to provide a definition, not arguments at that point. Those are not analogous. And you also said that people who are coming up to you and saying like, oh, well, I thought a vegan was a Jane and they had to do all this stuff. They're not saying that's the definition. They're saying that's the entailment from a definition they heard. If their definition is something like you shouldn't harm animals, then they're like, oh, well, that means you have to sweep the floor in front of you. That's an entailment from a definition, not the definition. We're talking about what definition we should use and why we should use it.
Yeah,
Those
but they've got
aren't
that idea
relevant
from
to the
a bad
topic.
definition, so we need to do some correcting on clarifying of the definition.
Right, and making the definition about an ethical way of living rather than an animal products boycott, I think is more clear about what the whole point of being a vegan is.
Right, but any words, any way that you try to put words in, ethical sentences into what it means to be vegan, is going to be exclusive to how people view their philosophy. Like it's going to be either too convoluted, or it's going to feel exclusive to one philosophy or another.
Yes,
whereas
that's present in every
you can just say
in every definition.
No, not in mine, because you can just say a cast iron. Sorry.
Yes, it is present in yours. Let me explain. Let me try a different tactic. You already grant there's a difference between vegan and plant-based, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a difference between vegan and plant-based. Your definition does not make that difference clear, because animal products boycott is plant-based, animal products boycott is vegan.
Well, if you include plant-based leather, then I don't say that it has to be a difference.
Right, and I think there is a big difference there between plant-based and vegan.
But if someone is like going down the ingredients list in supermarkets and like making sure they're definitely not like for like the most microscopic ingredients that can't be for health, and purposely not buying leather, not wanting to like advertise the products of animals, like yeah, I think they're like on side. They're like doing the tactics that we need to advance like ending the animal agriculture industry. Like they're comrades. What's wrong with that?
So palm oil is a comrade on your view?
It's a boycott.
Palm oil isn't an animal product though.
Right. So no, I'm saying.
But no, this is crucial.
Yeah,
palm oil is not an animal product, but really high sapient animals are dead, are dying because of the production of it. It's totally plant-based, but many vegans would say it is not vegan because it is unethical.
Right. So yeah, it depends on why you're vegan then. But yeah, if they go into the effort of like going down the ingredients list, not buying leather, then in that one aspect of their life, like I'm really happy that they're doing this tactic, which advances my aims, my goals of my goals of ending the animal agriculture industry. Like that's a massive win for us. But yeah, you can also be an awful person. You can be a neo-Nazi and want this end. So, but like I would encourage people to do other boycotts. But like this boycott has a cast iron meaning.
So someone who's doing an action that is in alignment with my moral goals could be doing it for moral goals that aren't true of like aren't ethical, that would be unethical for what we're doing.
Yeah. So like they're not an animal rights advocate, but they're achieving this strategy that we need to bring down the animal agriculture industry. One part of
because the reasons why they're doing it, if they're not for the animal rights there, once they achieve those reasons, there'd be no further reason for them to have the animal products boycott. Like, let's say that they were doing the animal products boycott because they were anti-capitalist, and then all of a sudden capitalists fell, then they would have no reason for them to stop eating animals or something like that. They could just start
Right.
killing animals at that point. They could hunt animals in the woods at that point.
Well, yeah, but no, because they couldn't. But they would never have been vegan if they were hunting animals in the woods. Because
so then your definition doesn't include hunters, because a boycott is about moral purchasing. It's about abstaining from certain purchases.
No, it's an ethical judgment on how the products were derived.
Boycotts are not relevant to hunting. They don't apply.
No, hunted meat does apply. So if you're
not if you hunt it yourself, that's not a boycott, because it's about purchasing. Boycotts by definition are about moral purchasing.
I agree, it's not a boycott.
So then, if it's not boycotting, then it doesn't fit your definition.
No, the person who desires to be a vegan, desires to do a boycott, would absolutely have to desire not to hunt animals, because
right. But if you tell someone, hey, the definition of veganism is an animal products boycott, then they would say, okay, I'm just going to go hunt animals then.
Right, that's the one, intuitional thing that's like a slight con to my definition. I accept that, but because the boycott has so many parallels to other real world events, you don't have to go to this high philosophy theoretical level. You can just say, oh, weren't you aware of all these other boycotts that happened in the world, like in the 70s, like when they were boycotting apartheid? Like obviously if you were boycotting the products of apartheid, you wouldn't suddenly fly over to South Africa and feel fine about beating up black people, joining the police.
Sure, but that's not the definition, which is what this debate is about.
Sorry, you said people will raise a concern with my definition that they think that they will be able to do it themselves.
No, not even raise a concern. It's just, if they walk down the street and you say to them that you have like a sign, like, ask me about veganism, and they ask you about veganism or something like that, and you just say, veganism is an animal products boycott, they keep walking, they have no other information, they're going to then have, based on that definition, the entailment of, oh, I can go hunting because I'm not buying the product there. I'm boycotting all the products, but because I'm killing it myself, I'm vegan. So Joe Rogan is vegan now. John Venus could be vegan still, because John Venus is killing deer.
Joe Rogan's eating burger patties, like he's not just
you get the point of what I'm saying.
No, I know, but I don't think that's like such a hypothetical, like they would be like a weird contradictory like person who thinks they think they're a vegan but they're actually not. Like
I've actually run into people who have said that very argument against veganism. Like, a lot of anti-vegans will say, like, oh, they'll ask you the definition, and then as a gotcha, they'll be like, oh, so I can go hunting then. I'm not buying it.
So you already have that with other definitions. You're making my point for me.
But in my definition, it has ethical way of living. So in that, it contains these outlier cases, like
right. And you have to go to that high theoretical level. Like I'm saying that like news, like people's like everyday like news of like boycotts, like it's just like it's like you don't even need to think about the ethics of it. You just think this person has like a real like strong commitment to protesting this issue, and obviously they wouldn't do it themselves. Like there's like it's actually a positive that it is brought up, because it's like you get to inform them about how similar it is to these other like important struggles.
Okay, so your argument right now is because the word boycott brings up these other notions of people fighting for important issues in our life, important ethical issues, the use of the word boycott will bring that up. Now, why does that not apply with the term ethical way of living? Because when people hear ethical way of living, they're also going to pull up all of these other things about ethics and trying to live a better life, live a life for the sake of others, for doing what is right. That's going to be baked into it as well.
A boycott infers ethics. Like I don't see the problem. If people want to have in their minds that like they still think of themselves as subscribing to the vegan society definition, like it's like a roadmap for explaining how everything fits together, exploitation, harm, like they can have that in their mind. But I'm just saying, when you're advocating, make like sell them on a definition that has a cast iron meaning. Any products that derive from the body of an animal as a strategy, a political strategy, and then the principle for why they do it. Like you're giving them arguments, you're giving them marginal cases, you're giving them like golden rule, and these are all like the principles that can like be the foundation for why they do it. And then once they've got the principle, you can say, oh great, you're an animal rights advocate, you're one of us.
Right. Okay. So I think maybe the difference here is the way I think of the definition, it should refer to the meaningful content behind it. But you're saying that it needs to refer to the meaningful action behind it. Now,
Yeah.
the main difference there is if all we have is to give a definition, we want to convey something important with that definition. I think the important thing to convey about veganism is the ethics about it, but you're saying the important thing to convey is the action about it.
Because it creates distance between it creates distance that encourages more people to use the word animal rights, and then animal rights like when you see more people using the word animal rights, you see it more as a political movement rather than like a subcultural identity.
I don't see why an animal products boycott encourages people to use the word animal rights.
Because the principle comes from animal rights, like or animal liberation or animal
that's
animal
not
welfare.
Clear by the that's not clear by the definition. It just means don't buy. It just means don't buy animal products.
It infers an ethical stance, yeah. So, but why would you have that ethical stance? Because you have some concern for the animals. You have the concern for their rights. You have the concern for their welfare. Whatever.
Yeah, but that's not in
the
definition.
It is.
There's, I mean, we have to. So all we have is the definitions, right? And what we want to, and what we're trying to convey. Your definition, while boycott has moral language baked into it, it's a specific type of moral language, specifically moral purchasing.
Yeah.
So in that definition of moral purchasing, it leaves out a lot of implications about what being vegan is. Implications that I think are really important.
Of how currently some vegans think veganism should be, but like, but if you have that under animal rights, then it's dead clear that we need more people lobbying, we need more people setting up vegan cafes, we need more people doing foraging groups, all these things.
Right, but your animal rights edition is about legal and political action, but we wouldn't. So like someone who. So are you saying that someone who doesn't take political action is not a vegan then?
And they're not an animal rights advocate.
No, I'm asking if they're vegan.
No, I know. I'm saying they're vegan, but they're not an animal rights advocate.
Okay,
and by creating distance, you put more importance on them being an animal rights advocate.
So you grant that a vegan doesn't need to be a political advocate; they just need to live an ethical way.
Yeah.
So your definition of the animal products boycott and of it being about this legal action is exclusionary to people you would call vegans.
No, it doesn't say that you can't be. It just says it doesn't have to be. Why would it be? Why would that make it exclusionary?
Because you're saying the definition of a vegan is someone who does this animal products boycott and who's doing this political, like the reasons are these political actions of animal rights and things like that. But it has nothing as part of that being ethics. No, you have to go more. You have to go farther to get to ethics because you're using animal rights in the legal sense, not the ethical sense.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
so now, by the time we get to ethics from your definition, by the time we get to ethics, it's like 4 degrees away. It's 4 degrees away from ethics.
You need ethics for veganism. You give them arguments. You say there's a principle. You say like there's a principle behind being vegan, and then what grounds it in the real world is wanting animal rights. What makes it effective? What goals you're pursuing?
What I don't understand is if you need ethics for veganism, why is the word ethics or something like the word ethics, a synonym, not in the definition?
Because it needs to be open. If it needs to be very open to nihilists, consequentialists, all sorts of people, and any time you try to put a sentence in there, it's going to be like it's going to be too complicated or
Why do we need to
too
make it open to nihilist?
exclusionist.
Why do
Sorry?
we need to make it open to nihilist?
Because there's some cool no, it's like what's his name? Saul Newman and what's his name? What's his name? Begins with a D. Nomadic ethics. Yeah, like you can think of ethics as just like not wanting to like be bow down to like social pressure and like all the advertisements about like eat a burger and you become a strong man. Like you can just be like repulsed by all that and you just want to like live a more authentically compassionate life. And
But that's an ethical position.
it's a meta. It can be you can have like a meta ethical
right. So that wouldn't be a nihilist.
Like, nihilist metaphysics. You can have error theories.
No, well, an error theorist is going to say that all moral propositions are false. They're not.
Yeah, or
I don't know
or
what
moral.
you mean by nihilist here.
Yeah, someone who like it's someone who has like someone who rejects you like that you can create universal rules, but in like hyper specific situations you can have desires, you can have desires that other people have similar desires to you, so you build institutions with some kind of like social virtue that's non-universifiable. Yeah, there's like Beauvoir, Sartre, all these people that had like a method of nihilist ethics.
I don't see how that gets you to why your definition is better, because an error theorist is going to have no good reason to accept any ethics at all. So all you would be doing is trying to persuade the error theorist using something like their preferences, which is a fine argument. But when we talk about the definition of veganism, that's a different question than how we should persuade an error theorist.
Why does it have to be? And like, why can't we just advocate as a behavior that any ethical or non-ethical person can do? Any metaphysics person.
What do you mean? What do you mean with it? Why? How does an animal products boycott being the definition convince error theorists of boycotting animal products?
I'm not deep into understanding error theory. I'm just thinking of like the famous philosophers.
They're like atheists of morality. Right. Yeah, an error theorist is just an atheist of morality. They think that there's no proposition about morality that's true.
Right, but you can get like nihilists who understand like that they have like a metaphysical like values that they were brought up with in the world, and then they kind of like they can't help but think in ways that are like rules, but they would like to pursue a life with more like authenticity, and so they skeptically critically question every value that they were brought up with, and then like try to pick up try to test them against other values as they go along, and come to the conclusion that they prefer a world in which people have similar desires to them, and then just what happens
how does
to be
how does your definition provide greater utility for the nihilist?
Because it doesn't say that like that doesn't say like you can't exploit like people, you can't like socially obligate people to hold open doors for you. Like it doesn't obligate you to reduce harm in every situation. Like live your life like a Jain monk. Like it's like it doesn't
Neither does my definition. But I don't understand how your definition is more persuasive to the nihilist.
Because like any definition which includes ethical language has to like account for these things. Like your definition, I'm quite interested in it. Like you're selling me on it, but it has to do some take some explaining. Whereas you could just have that wording in the principle of what it means to be an animal rights advocate, and then people think of themselves as that first, and then doing a political strategy through veganism afterwards.
Well, why don't you make the definition veganism is being an animal rights advocate?
Because we need just because it doesn't you have to further explain animal rights. You need like a two-tier thing. You need like a principle and then an action, and if you want to explain the action, it has cast iron things, and if you want to explain the principle, then it's more varied.
Well, okay, so I have a feeling that maybe what you want a definition to do might be too much for a definition.
Okay.
So like
Can you
the
explain
point
that?
of a definition is not to make the argument. The point of a definition is to refer to some type of content here. And I think the important content of being a vegan is the ethics
Mm-hmm.
rather than the actions.
I think the important part of being an animal rights advocate is the ethics, but veganism is this weird vegetable Aryan term that I think we just like other boycotts didn't have an identity one took on when boycotting. So it's good that we have one. It's like we can sell it, we can use it for like selling people like just be vegan, do this amazing political strategy, but we don't need to worry about it too much as like an identity.
I think other groups had identities, like civil rights advocates had an identity as a civil rights advocate. And I think that people use things like virtue, etc., to convince people to be a civil rights advocate.
Can you? Yeah, exactly. I think you need virtue. You need like a virtual argument or a consequential argument or a deontological argument to be a principled animal rights advocate. But that was a larger movement that veganism just doesn't like sound as appealing as animal rights. Can you think of so civil rights people, like they demonstrated boycott came and went. Like it wasn't. I can't think of any boycott that you happen to have an identity for it.
Abolitionists, for example. Abolitionists, that was an identity, and people, like someone would say I'm an abolitionist, and you knew right away what that was, what they were fighting for.
What were they boycotting?
Slavery. Abolitionists were against slavery, and they would try to make their own products. They would free slaves. They would fight for legislation. They were having this.
But that was very much more like abolishing the law. Like that was very much more like a lobbying thing, wasn't it?
Well, they didn't have lobbying back then. They just had they could write newspapers. They could give speeches. Like the way that they did advocacy back then is different, but that doesn't change the fact
it wasn't so much encouraging people not to buy slaves. It was encouraging
no, they were encouraging people not to buy slaves, and they were buying slaves and freeing them. They were doing all kinds of things. They were like rescuing slaves. They were like trying to foment war in some cases.
Okay. Well, I'm glad they had that identity, and I think I'm glad that vegans have this identity. But
right. So I guess I don't understand why the identity is a problem. I mean, the whole debate is about like what definition should be used here.
Yeah, and I just think a two-tier identity where one has a very simple meaning that we can use for getting people on board, with a dead simple set of like what actions entails is really good for advocacy. and the principle coming from another word, animal rights.
I don't understand why a two-tiered identity. I mean, at this point, we're sort of going in circles. Maybe we should move to a vote soon.
Yeah, that's cool.
Do you want to do closing statements?
Yeah, I can give the same closing statement I gave last time. Grey areas. I didn't use my notes still really much this time, so Well, I mean, actually, do you want to? I mean, I can give you one more argument about appealing to the history of the term,
Sure.
the vegan society, so hang on, let's see, 5 minutes. So yeah, oh shit, sorry, 1 sec. I can't find it. So basically, like, veganism came out of the vegan society came out of like lots of debates back and forth, like in journals. Like they had their vegan magazine, and people would every meeting, it started to boil over in London. Like people were having meetings where vegans, like people who were boycotting all use of animal products, they really wanted the vegetarian definition to become the vegan definition, not using any animal products, and there was but they were getting pushback from religious, like Hindu vegetarians, and weird people who were like euthanized people, abortion advocates, that just wanted it to be ovo lacto vegetarian, and so they set up their own vegetarian society. But the arguments that all these people were using was to encourage people over to boycotting the dairy and egg industries because of for harm reasons and welfare reasons, and exploitation reasons. And so what it meant for them to be a vegan was just boycotting the an animal products boycott. And if they'd tried to define it as so basically it was a mistake to try to, when they tried to define it as the doctrine that man should not exploit animal. Like no one on the street is gonna remember that veganism is the doctrine that man should not exploit animal. How they viewed vegans as these people who were going a step further than vegetarian and boycotting all animal products. So to create all these other definitions with different phrasing about ethics is like defining like nudists as people who wear pink hats. Like it's not going to fly. So yeah, I don't know. I think
I don't understand that last analogy.
Well, it's you can, so just you're just adding like loads of words onto an animal products boycott, which no one's going to remember. No one is going to relate to what it means to be a vegan, and so you're not actually advocating. It's just never going to work. You're never going to You're never going to make the colloquial understanding of vegan as this thing with loads of other extended things. If you look up vegan, go vegan on Google, you get a person who doesn't consume animal products. And why don't they consume it? Because they're doing a boycott. They're trying to disincentivize.
But if you look up veganism on Google, it'll say a
same
philosophical way of living.
No, same thing. Animal products boycott.
Veganism?
Yeah.
The definition that I got is an associated philosophy that rejects the commodity status of animals.
I don't get that. That's weird. I'm on Firefox.
Oh, maybe that's it. I'm on Safari. But so the point is like, if you Google vegan, it's someone who follows veganism. And I also don't think that definitions are all encompassing. But your point about the origins of the word vegan having this problem at the time, the definition having that problem at the time, that's fine. I don't see an issue with that, with the definition today, because we have a different context. People today have a common sense understanding that vegans are doing so based on morality. So much so that the jokes about vegans are people who preach and shame and virtue signal and all this stuff, all this moral language, that they're like bad for doing this moralism. That's the common sense understanding of what it means to be a vegan. So if we're to talk about the use of the vegan in colloquial usage here, it already has ethics baked into it. People already have an understanding about the animal products boycott. I think the proper definition would be one that advocates why people are being vegan, some ethical way of living, rather than the actions, because the ethical way of living is the actions plus the reasons. It just contains a little bit more information that's meaningful.
Yeah, I think you're digging a hole by it's this utility in that, because you forget about animal rights. You don't like someone's a vegan because they want to be part of the subculture. They're not like
Well, that's not the definition.
They're not a political movement.
That's not the definition. Doesn't contain being part of a culture. The definition is an ethical way of living.
But like you're not even like, some people might not even be aware that there's that people like are looking to give habitat rights to animals, or give personhood status to animals. Like you obviously you have like a philosophy about why you're not wearing leather, why you're not eating these foods, and you're very like culturally outside of like what the norm is. So yeah, but obviously there's going to be loads of memes about that. But yeah, I don't think people know that the definition is any more than you're happening to abstain from animal products for ethical reasons.
Well, so when you say they don't hold on. When you say they don't know the definition contains this, that's not the claim. The claim I'm making is their definition contains ethics.
So again, their definition.
My claim is that people in general have a view that vegans are practicing this because of the ethics. I'm not making the claim that the definition contains it, therefore people do.
Yeah. So, but that is contained within my definition as well. Like the
no, your definition doesn't have ethics as part of it.
Infers it, yeah. Is it the
right? But you get so finally after you unpack it, after like 5 things, you get to ethics. No. Okay, let's go through it. Animal products boycott.
No. Let me say this.
Go through it.
The colloquial understanding when you search vegan is a person who does not eat or use animal products. That's what people understand a vegan is. Yeah, yes, it has to be done for ethical reasons, and mine does that.
No, you're appealing to the dictionary here for the colloquial usage. I'm not accepting that as being as regarding the colloquial usage. I'm saying that people have notions of a vegan having ethics because of these other things, like the moralist memes that pop up about vegans.
I'm saying that's right, but I'm saying that's like tangential, as inferred after people realize that vegan is like one step past vegetarian, where they're not consuming animal products, and I'm fine with it with ethics being included, but people have like a weird understanding of what ethics.
Sorry.
Well, people have like tons of weird people have tons of weird beliefs about what principles vegans hold, but by making it clear to them that veganism doesn't contain the principle, veganism is just the behavior, that animal rights is the principle, and being part of animal rights is the movement. So you don't need to take on this identity of like when you become a vegan.
Identity. I've never invoked an identity. You keep referring to an identity I've never talked about.
I'm saying the public at the moment, it's problematic that the public at the moment view veganism as having all these like weird principles that create weird identities.
While that is problematic, that is not an argument for the definition, because they're doing that based on logical conclusions from a definition. So what's problematic is that they have this set of arguments leading them to that point of view, not that the definition is getting there.
No, I would argue that I'd argue that they view the definition as like reducing all harm, or trying to cover all exploitation. Like I view the problem as them not understanding a clear definition.
But that's not what people accept. So whenever I'm saying that the common sense view of veganism, all I'm saying is that they have baked into it ethical notions. There are specific times where someone would say that it's about suffering, or someone would say it's about animal rights or whatever. But all that I'm saying is that ethics are part of it. Now, my claim is your definition is removed from ethics, which is, so we have animal products boycott. Boycott there is the part that has the moral language. Boycotting is moral purchasing. So we get to purchasing certain products because of some type of ethical reason, but that doesn't get us to ethical reasons for the sake of animals yet, because you can be doing that for ethical reasons based on capitalism, say. So we've got 3 degrees from the definition, and we haven't even gotten to
one degree
ethics for the animals.
Yeah, 1 degree to legal animal rights, and legal animal rights has to include a principle.
That's not what I did 3.
Sorry?
I did 3. There are 3. So first, animal products boycott. Next one, boycott means moral purchasing. Next one.
No. What? Yeah. No. that's all included in the first one though, because
no, it's not included. It's not included. We have to unpack it to get there. And there's nothing about for the sake of animals yet, because I've already illustrated a point where it could be for the sake of anti-capitalism.
So animal products boycott, like what does a boycott mean?
Animal products boycott.
Oh, because you haven't unpacked anything yet. You've just explained that the definition is it. So unpacking what animal products boycott means, the boycott means an ethical judgment on the actions that.
Right. So when I'm counting something, I'm counting the first thing in a series as number 1. I don't count it as 0. Okay. So animal products boycott is 1. Right. That's 1 degree. The second degree is boycott means moral purchasing. The third degree is what is moral referring to?
No, it doesn't need to be moral purchasing. Like you have an ethical judgment, and then why you have the ethical judgment comes from the second degree, which is you are an animal rights advocate.
There's no ethical judgment yet in your definition. There's no ethical judgment yet. You just put that in there. The definition is an animal products boycott. Yes, boycotts. That's where we're talking about. Boycott doesn't have ethical, obviously there. We have to unpack it. So that's where we get to moral. That's where we get to moral purpose.
Boycott, like conceptually, absolutely, like a protest. Like you like people understand it as being related to all these other ethical fights. Absolutely is like really easily understood as an.
I don't think any word is absolute, so I'm not sure what you mean by absolutely here.
I'm saying it has pragmatic utility in the English language as being something that identifies one as doing something for an ethical reason.
But a boycott doesn't have to be ethical.
Tell me a boycott that isn't about ethics.
Yeah, I could just not purchase like let's say that I don't like a certain song.
That's not a process.
Because it has lyrics that have something in it I don't like. And then my favorite cigarette company uses that song. And then I say, wow, I'm never buying cigarettes from them because they use a song I don't like. I don't see any ethics as part of that.
It's a very shitty boycott.
But it's still a boycott. It's still a boycott, which illustrates the point.
And what point?
It illustrates the point that boycotts are not necessarily ethical.
No, you'd still be like doing it.
You said boycotts are absolutely ethical in all cases, and I've illustrated a counterexample. So if the claim is all Fs are Gs, and I point out that here's an F that's not a G, I've then shown that it doesn't follow.
I don't see how this is relevant. Like first of all, like you have to challenge that an animal products boycott. Those words all together can't necessarily mean that it can't that you can do that without ethics. And then I am
doing that right now. That's the relevance of this. Me doing it right now. I've unpacked that the word boycott doesn't necessarily. Let me finish, please. It doesn't necessarily show. It doesn't necessarily show that ethics are part of it. It could be a majority of the understandings, but it's not necessary. And then I've shown that the morality doesn't necessarily have to entail for the sake of animals. So your definition of an animal products boycott takes several degrees to even get to the point of ethical consideration for the animals.
No,
The only reason why people will assume it has ethical consideration is because they already have a common sense view that veganism is about ethics for the animal, which supports my previous claim that the common sense view contains ethics for animals.
They have a common sense view of people boycotting for processed ethical reasons. Like you're removing an animal products and just saying, oh, look at some other boycott that can be done for like really fatuous reasons with like the very low level ethics. But like, I don't see how that's relevant. Like when you put the words together, an animal products boycott, you're doing something primarily against the animal agriculture industry.
The relevance was in refutation to a claim
you already granted me it was ethics, so why are we having this discussion?
The relevance, I granted that it was a common sense view, but then you made the claim that it is necessarily and absolutely always ethics. So that was a refutation to the claim you made. That's the relevance. And the reason why you made the claim was because that was in support of your argument containing ethics from the very beginning. And I'm telling you that it is not obvious from the beginning, it's inferred or implied. We have to get there and the only reason why that even works is because of the common sense view. So the whole point of the debate is what definition we should use and why. The definition we should use, on my view, is the one that refers to a meaningful content about what it is to be a vegan. We've gone through several hypotheticals where we would call a vegan someone who lives ethically with respect for the animals, not just simply the animal products boycott. So the meaningful content that we've both agreed on is this part, not the action. You're trying to say because it has this practical utility in activism that we should use this one. But when you point to it being practical, you go to the explanations about the definition, not the definition itself. And the explanations contain ethics. And that's just supporting my view that the ethical part is the meaningful part of what it is to be a vegan.
Yeah, it infers ethics, so that is very meaningful. But we don't need to, but we can just think of it's really important that we encourage people to be animal rights advocates, because in the word animal rights is more clear than vegetarianism or veganism. So yeah, I think, I don't know, I'm getting tired, so I'm losing the thread a bit, but yeah, I don't know.
Maybe we should do, we'll do some closing statements and then go to a vote.
Cool. Yeah.
You started. So would you like me to go first for the closing statement?
Whatever, yeah.
Because you started the debate, do you have a preference on who goes first for the closing statements? I don't really care.
I don't mind. Yeah, you go first. Honestly, it's fine.
Okay.
Or if you want to go last, it's fine.
No, I'm happy for you to have the last word.
Okay.
So let me just pull up my notes.
Cool.
I need the proposition. Okay, so today's proposition was that we should define veganism as an animal products boycott, which is primarily against animal agriculture, and not my definition, which is veganism is an ethical way of living that exclude using animals as merely instruments to our ends. Now, the point of why we should use a certain word is because of what the word conveys, the meaning behind it. And we went through the debate several times in hypotheticals pointing at what is the important meaning behind being a vegan. And we both agreed that the importance there is the ethics about it, the reasons why you're not consuming animal products. So we agree that it is not simply the actions. And if we agree that the ethics are the meaningful difference between our definitions here, then we should have that included in the definition itself. Hence why mine is veganism is an ethical way of living, et cetera, et cetera. Now, my opponent said boycott has baked into it notions of ethics. I do agree that boycott does imply ethics, but it doesn't tell us what kind of ethics. And I pointed out that there are different ethical considerations that could lead someone to boycotting animal products, one of which being anti-capitalism. So just because ethics are implied, it's not clear what kind of ethics. So we need more conversation about what the ethics are, what's grounding it. And then from there, we get to moral purchasing, which has another problem. If it's just boycotting things you could buy, then there's nothing telling hunters that they can't go hunt, that is not unethical. The definition we presented by my opponent is lacking in that regard. So we could have people coming away from that being like, hey, I can just be Joe Rogan and go hunt all the meat that I want and feed my family for a year eating elk. The rest of my meals will be vegan. No big deal, because I'm boycotting animal products. But I think when we talk about what definition we should use, we need to point out what it's referring to. In this case, it's the ethics. And I think the ethics need to be explicit in the definition, because a definition is just describing something. It's not trying to have this grand argument. We can make the arguments later. And my opponent agreed that we would make arguments later that could clarify the meaning of the definition. So I say we get our foot in the door right away at the heart of veganism, the ethics.
No, that's very good. Okay, so I'm just going to read some parts of my script because I don't have as good memory as you about the whole debate. So yeah, I'm arguing for an animal products boycott. This is a minimal behavioral commitment with very little confusion about what it entails. The idea that it's a protest allows for other priorities to override. The idea like the need to take vaccines with egg product. Either way, it's still a strong commitment to a commercial boycott. It's both the reason the vegan society was created and simply the colloquial understanding of a vegan as a person who does not eat or use animal products, but leaves room for veganism. And or you can still define yourself as vegan by a way of living which seeks to exclude all use of animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. This includes other boycott behaviors like avoiding animals in entertainment, but is vague about whether it entails a weaker or stronger commitment to the act of boycotting itself. Potentially, we could move solely to this one one definition when we can afford to give more or less equal focus to campaigning against other industries. So that was all behavior. Where does the principle come from? Well, animal rights, the philosophy which says animals should be granted collective legal rights to have a refuge in dense wildlife habitat where they aren't subject to human cruelty, with maybe the few exceptions where the law is overridden by right to self-defense or special dispensation from the government to like keep guide dogs for the blind or something. I'll just deal with the hunting thing because you said that in your statement. One sec. Yeah. Would you be okay with hunting wild animals yourself then? I would argue implicit in the word boycott is an ethical judgment on the activity that creates the product. So when I boycott animals across the board because of every aspect of the process that goes into making the product, such as breeding, captivity, and or killing, it wouldn't suddenly be okay for me to then go out and do that killing myself just because I didn't sell the meat on. You can't desire that all commercial use of animal products stop existing in the world through a commercial boycott, and also do an action which, through your boycotting, hope to prevent the incentive for ever happening. And yeah, finally, I just draw. I just say boycotts have real pragmatic use, conceptual use. People can relate it to real world events as great positive coming together moments under a liberation politics. For example, car sharing during the Montgomery bus boycott, students leading the call to stop subsidizing Israel, and before that South Africa, the widespread boycotting of a reactionary tabloid newspaper in the UK that ran stories saying mass suffocation at football stadium due to overcrowding and fences were the fans' fault. So boycotting to show your real felt ties to the land you stand on. The first boycott was people simply withdrawing their labour from an imperialist landlord in Ireland in a desire to build something greater once he left. So I think it is very flexible to positive intention, which is what we need. So there you go. That's my ending statement.
Great. Thank you both for debating. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So now we just need to decide which voting poll you guys want to do. Do you guys just want to do the regular one, or do you want to do the new one that's a 3-question one?
I don't know what the new one is, but I don't mind.
Sure, so I'll just give you like a brief rundown. So the new one asks the audience 3 questions, and the first is something like, who had the better argumentation? The second is, who had the better rebuttals and counter arguments? The third is who had the better overall rhetoric. So the audience. Oh, you want to do that one? Cool.
I don't mind doing that one. Do you mind, Arco?
Okay, and to the audience that was here for at least 75% of the debate, I'm going to be posting the voting poll in debate chat. Again, just only vote if you were here for 75% of the debate, and also you only have 7 minutes to debate, and you cannot change your vote, so if you make a mistake, just let a staff member know and we'll fix it. Thank you all for tuning in.
Amazing. Yeah, you definitely wouldn't. I mean, in terms of like being a better debater,
it was awesome. A lot of fun. I really appreciate it. I thought you did a great job. So don't sell yourself short.
Cheers. It's 1:30 in the morning here, so I'm a bit tired. But
yeah, fair enough. I honestly think